The definition of theory is as follows: a plausible or scientifically acceptable general principle or body of principles offered to explain phenomena.
What's up, theorists? I'm your host, Canned Goods. Today, we're going to be talking about the legend that is Bigfoot on the Canned Theory Show. So let's get into it. This is the first cryptid that I've discussed on the channel. He's known as Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Sam Squamch, and most primarily he has been sighted throughout the North American continent. Is he real? Yes, and let's get into why. The legend of Bigfoot begins in North America, and these creatures were rumored to have stood side by side in like a truce with Native Americans. This doesn't only limit these creatures to just North America, as Asia has their own. There are the Yetis in the Himalayas. There's a Florida Bigfoot or swamp monster, and they're all very similar to one another. So there have been thousands of sightings of each of these. Could they all be fake? No, they can't. There has to be some credibility. Bigfoot lives. Not only that, there are multiple of them ranging the North American forest. They are tall, with hair covering their body, giant feet, and they're bipedal. They stand on two legs, almost like this giant version of a missing link between ape and man. Their feet alone can be as big as 2 feet long and 8 inches in width. It's simply massive. Like, even basketball players would be dwarfed by this. It's almost double the size of their feet. And in stature, these guys are like 8 to 10 feet in height too. And it's believed, and I believe, that they're living in family units. So they range over vast distances to hunt, gather, and provide for these communities of Sasquatches. So many eyewitness accounts claim to have seen Bigfoot that in their remarkable numbers and reportings, even the FBI jumped on ship and decided to investigate. And we all know there are many series out there dedicated to hunting Bigfoot. And a lot of these guys that are really into it are professionals and have evidence that these tracks cannot be duplicated by anything like a bear. And they simply are, the way the feet anchors isn't like a man. So a giant person in a suit couldn't actually be making these tracks. But in 1958, there was an incident in Humboldt, California, where a man was taking like pretty much artificially constructed feet and creating tracks and stamps just to kind of further the hoax. It was later said that came out as a prank. But since that time, the spark really hit and people really dug into finding for Bigfoot. And through this, there's been some very compelling evidence that Bigfoot does exist. And I myself definitely think that there's one case above the rest that stands true. On October 20th, 1967, Bigfoot was caught on film by what is known now as the Patterson Gimlin film. These two men, Roger Pattinson and Bob Gimlin, were up in Northern California doing a hike, and they were just shy of the Oregon border when they were in a clearing, and from a far distance, they had their camera. They saw this creature lumbering left to right from their angle. And in it, you see what is 1967, a very, very convincing creature walking. Now, this has gone on to be the subject and probably the most well-known and iconic footage of an actual Bigfoot. The reason being, Planet of the Apes, just around that time, had just come out. And if you look at the makeup and the special effects and the costumes used in that movie, it doesn't compare to what you see in the footage. And the man who actually won an Oscar for doing the costume work for Planet of the Apes said he could not have recreated that. And scientists have delved in and seen, hey, look at this footage. You can actually see various muscles. You can see tricep muscles activating. You can see deltoids activating. This is like some really, really advanced stuff if this was just a suit. And the way that the creature was built, this is way too tall to be any man. It'd have to be on stilts. And they've actually had professional athletes and figures try to replicate the gait of this creature or its walk. And they said that even when they tried to do it, it was unnatural. And if you look at the actual film, I just have an image selected here of it, but if you watch the actual film yourself, you will see that this is like just its movement. That's how it walks. It's clearly some kind of link. It's part man, part ape, but not at the same time because it is so large in size that these things seem to have been around for a long, long time. Just as it was said in American folklore, Indians and Native Americans, they believe these things have existed since longer than man itself. Roger Pattinson died of cancer in 1972, but his entire life he stood by that this was not a hoax. This was not any kind of manipulation. This was just an event that they filmed, and they caught a creature on tape. And Bob Gimlin also kind of stood out of the public eye, but he maintains the same. He never denied that this was a false sighting. He started doing conferences in 2000s and actually confirming, yes, I do believe this was an actual sighting of Bigfoot. Now let's talk about Jeff Meldrum, a so-called expert on Bigfoot. This man has devoted pretty much his entire life to studying Bigfoot. He's educated. He has pretty much the largest collection of prints and casts of the feet and tracks of Bigfoot. This man's collection is so vast, he has over 200 casts. He is pretty much considered the top expert on Bigfoot and Bigfoot sightings, the study of the creature, and he also delves into like Yetis, and he's done like numerous Sasquatch seminars, spoken with the Bigfoot hunters, and been on that series multiple times. Meldrum claims that a lot of these prints and the hairs that they've actually found as evidence of these sites, they can't be duplicated, and they're still of an unknown species. So what do we have here? We have something that is deemed by a professional to be authentic. Critics claim that this is hoaxy, and his own peers in his field also criticize him. But I, for one, believe the man. There wouldn't be so many sightings and so much convincing proof. This wouldn't be a thing if they weren't actually real. Before modern day just interest in tourism business even started, they were already known about. And they probably had a much bigger run of things because as specifically North America has expanded in technology and been moving further and further into forest regions, their local habitat has just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. So it makes sense we don't see them now. And being that there's only probably maybe a couple thousand of them, you think, hey, that's a lot. Somebody's probably seen them. Well, yeah, they probably have. But the thing is, that's not as many as you think. Like, there's not going to be all together. When you consider how large North America itself is and how vast and, you know, a mountain, a tree, they could hide behind anything. And if they're an advanced species that looks over their own family and community, they probably bury their dead. And that's probably why you don't see any evidence of, you know, corpses or bodies or anything like that. They're still waiting on those bodies, but for now, all we have is sightings, which people say, you know, hey, all we have is these sightings. That's just as crazy as UFO sightings. But then again, as I've talked about with UFO sightings, some of those have way too much backstory to them. And it's the same thing for these Bigfoot sightings. There's just too much behind them, too many people. Yeah, sure, there's some wackos out there. There's been some incidents, some hoaxes. But there's authentic hairs that nobody can prove what species it's from. The tracks seem to line up that it's not a bear, it's not artificial, it's not man-made. There's just too much going on there. And even the FBI, as I mentioned, has investigated this. there was an incident in 1977. Some tracks were found. There were hairs nearby. They took it up and checked it out. Turns out that one was a hoax, and it was actually deer hair or hair belonging to the deer family. But is that the only case that they investigated? If the FBI is getting in on this thing, you know it's got some kind of potential. They wouldn't just be like, oh, all these crazies are talking about seeing these giant hairy ape monsters. Let's investigate it, see if it's real. No, it doesn't line up. The FBI would only take it seriously if there was actual credibility, which they did. They did an investigation. They disclosed their findings on one incident. Okay. Like, if they found an actual Bigfoot track and the team determined it to be legitimate, why would they tell everyone? Everyone would just be even more in a frenzy and doing Bigfoot hunting as tourism. People would literally be out there trying to poach Bigfoot, which they probably do already. There's a whole lot of strange stuff that goes on up in the Pacific Northwest, but I think it would just be to a level that's too crazy. And if these things are out there, why would we want to wipe them out and cause another extinction of this species that's been around for probably as long, if not longer, than we have? Think about it. They're covered in hair. They're built for the ice ages. We're not. As a species, we barely survived the ice ages and came through intact. These things have probably been around in these forests and in these harsh conditions doing their thing far longer than we have. If the FBI is getting in on this and they found that something had something realistic that could actually be related, why would they tell us? There's got to be something there. In a recent poll taken, 1 in 10 Americans believe that Bigfoot is actually a real animal. I'm one of those 1 in 10, honestly. I'm going to speak with you truly, theorists. I think they're out there. I believe in protecting these animals. They have, they've earned their place, and they ain't bothering us. If anything, we're bothering them. We need to leave these things be. Those guys on Animal Planet doing the Finding Bigfoot series, keep doing your thing, I guess. I mean, those guys are out there doing squatching, as it's called, hunting for Bigfoot. You guys keep doing your thing. Don't hurt these animals if you actually find them. I think a lot of this stuff is just for money. A lot of people actually believe that, they're not real. It's just curiosity. And the guys that do think that it's real, doing these shows and just trying to promote it, just trying to make a buck off of it, whatever. As long as you're not hurting them, keep on it. I'm interested in it. I've never really been a big fan of those series. I think they're kind of flaky and they just kind of fall apart. There's no real evidence and they just kind of keep it going as a cash cow. But the tourism industry, if you ever go up to the Pacific Northwest, it's a whole thing. There's literally a cultural focus on Bigfoot. He has cemented himself as probably the most significant and most prominent cryptid that exists in the world. Yeah, you have things like the Loch Ness Monster, but Bigfoot, the amount of sightings of it is just, I think it could definitely be real. It could be an ancestor of apes and giant apes that crossed the Bering Strait during the Ice Age to come to North America. They evolved into bipedal animals, and they found refuge in places that our evolution line couldn't. They're living in harsh tundra conditions and mountainous terrains and high altitudes. We settled in valleys where we could harvest plants. We could hunt things that we had capabilities of. These things are massive. They can pretty much live off of any weather conditions. So all I'm saying is, Bigfoot, he's real. Sasquatches, Yetis, they're out there. They're doing their thing. Let's leave them alone. Keep on jiving, you Bigfoot out there. So for the condensed segment, thank you guys for tuning in. Bigfoot is real. Keep on squatching. Bigfoot, you are the social distancing champion of 2020. Thank you for your efforts not to spread COVID to the masses. Go Bigfoot, social distancing champ. Thanks for watching, guys. Bigfoot's real. Check us out on all the platforms. I love you guys. And if you notice, my clock is still broken. The bird drone strike EMP'd it. Still haven't been able to repair that sucker. They're real. Bird drones, they're out there. Bigfoot, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. I love you, man. My brother, my Sam Squamch. Theorists, I love you guys. This is your host, Canned Goods, signing off.